Guess what? Positive thinking can heal you of any disease. Negative thinking can create any disease. It can even kill you. You believe you're going to die? That's the belief. Anger has a chemistry. Jealousy has a chemistry. All of our emotions are chemicals. And I say, so what? I say, well, you have a thought in your head, and that thought is translated into chemistry by the brain. The chemistry goes into the body via the blood and adjusts the genetics. So what was the point? What was the starting point of that cascade? And the answer was a thought. And then people go, oh, thinking, like, oh, positive thinking. I go, guess what? For nearly 100 years, medicine has recognized, yeah, positive thinking is very important because it provides for what we call the placebo effect. You have an illness, the doctor said, here's the greatest new pill. This is made just for your illness. You take that pill, you get better. And then you find out the pill was a sugar pill. You're only left with one conclusion. What heals you? The belief in the sugar pill. Now, everybody goes, oh, yeah, placebo, placebo. I go, yeah, but no one talked about what about negative thinking? Because placebo is positive, equally powerful in shaping your life, but in the opposite direction. It's about 50 years ago, even more than 50, I was cloning stem cells, and people go, what, stem cells, that's a topic of conversation, but what are stem cells? Stem cells are embryonic cells in your body. And the reason why you have embryonic cells in your body is very simple. When you look in the mirror, see yourself as a single entity, that's an illusion. You're actually made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity, and so I say, well, this is great, 50 trillion cells. And then I go, but every minute we lose millions of cells. The number is so hard to imagine. But when you're doing trillions, that number is so big that nobody understands it. It's, oh, trillion. But it's so we lose a million cells every minute or so. And by the end of the day, you've lost about several 100 billion cells. I go, well, how many days can you live if you lose that many cells every day? And the answer is you can't. And so I want everyone to understand, if you're watching this show, the reason why you're watching this show is that inside your body are stem cells, which is another word for embryonic cell. And I say, what are their function? Well, obviously, what the point is, if you're losing that many cells every day, you have to replace that many cells every day. And so if your question, do I have stem cells? The answer is, if you're watching this program, yes, you do. I was teaching in the medical school, medical students, and I was teaching cell biology and understanding the nature of genetics. And I go, back in those days, the conventional story, unfortunately, it's still the conventional story because the public hasn't caught up with the science. Mm-hmm. The story was that genes control the character of your life. And I go, well, that was a very unfortunate situation, because I say, well, wait a minute. As far as you know, did you pick the genes you came with? I go, no. And I say, if you don't like the characteristics, can you change those genes? They go, no. And then we add on top of that, genes turn on and off by themselves. And all of a sudden you start to realize what we have been teaching is victimization, meaning your life is not under your control. Your life is under the control of the genes, and you have no control over them. And all of a sudden I say we're a victim. And people, please understand, when a person perceives themselves to be a victim, they're perceiving themselves to be powerless. I have no control. And when a person is powerless, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to look for somebody to empower them. And unfortunately, having been a former professor in medical school, what is controlling us is, in one sense, controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, because those are the rescuers. They're coming in. Your body's not working right. We have a chemical. We'll put that chemical in. You'll be safe. And everybody gives up and goes, yes, give me a prescription. And I go, well, let's look at this for a couple of seconds. Number one is this, is that genes, when everybody's been told, genes turn on, genes turn off. Let me give you a very important insight. A gene is simply a blueprint to make a protein. And the proteins are the building blocks of your body, about 100,000 different proteins. And I go, but proteins are very complex molecules and they wear out, they break down. You put a piece of meat on a plate and come back a week later, that meat's not
Yeah,
going to look
yeah.
the same. And I
Right.
go, so your proteins are breaking down, normal wear, but you have to replace them. And they're very complex molecules. So, interesting point is the gene is a blueprint to make the protein. That's exactly what it is. I go, so why is that important? The answer is very simple. Go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint and say, hey, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at you like, hey, crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. I go, precisely. Blueprints are information, but they have to be read. You read a blueprint. So I say, the genes are information, but which genes, which blueprints you're going to look at have to be selected. I go, well, who does the selecting? I go, now we jump from the genes making the selection and we find out that consciousness. And I go, number one, let's clear the air right here. This is very important. The most valid science on this planet today, the most valid science is quantum physics. There's no
Yeah.
more truth there's more truth than any other science. I go, recognize a fact. Principle number one from day one, quantum physics, 1927, consciousness is creating our life experience. And I go, this is not philosophy. This is actually physics. And I go, oh my God, consciousness is creating that. Well, in medicine, as most people know, for years and years, only until recent times, did even consciousness come into our understanding. What they're still suggesting to the public is you're controlled by genes. And
Yeah.
if you're controlled by genes, then that means you have no control. And that means you're a victim. And that means we must find somebody to heal us. And the relevance about all that is genes are responsible. This is a very important scientific fact. Genes are responsible for less than 1% of disease. I go, well, wait a minute. Everybody was genes for alcoholism, genes for diabetes, genes and genes. I go, no, 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 no. Genes are for less than 1%. Well, actually, there's about 6 of them. There's about
Yeah.
6 dominant one gene. You got this gene, you have like hemophilia. You got a hemophilia gene, you got hemophilia. Okay. And so the bottom line is this, that we have to understand what is controlling the genes. Well, this is where 50 years ago, I was culturing or cloning stem cells. And I'd say, wait, stem cell, embryonic cell, cloning. You put one cell in a petri dish all by itself, and it divides every 10 hours. So first there's 1, then there's 2, then there's 4, 8, 16, doubling. At the end of the week, 30,000 cells in the petri dish. Most important scientific fact, they all came from one parent. That meant they're all 30,000 genetically identical cells. So I split the cells into 3 petri dishes. All dishes had genetically identical cells. Grow cells in a fluid called culture medium. A culture medium is a laboratory version of blood. So if I grow human cells, I say, what's human blood made out of? And then in the lab, I synthesize a version called culture medium. Well, since I'm synthesizing the culture medium in the lab, I make 3 different versions of culture medium. Now remember, culture medium is environment for the cells. And I make 3 slightly different versions of culture medium. Let's call them environment A, B, and C. So I have 3 dishes, genetically identical cells. And then what's interesting about it is I feed one dish environment A, I feed another dish culture medium with environment B, and the third dish with a different environment. That's all it basically is. But what happened is in environment A, the cells form muscle. In environment B, genetically identical cells, but they form bone. And in the third dish, again, genetically identical cells, but a different environment, they form fat cells. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm teaching in the medical school room right next door that genes control life. And these experiments say the determination of the fate of those cells wasn't based on the genes. They all had the same genes. It was based on the environmental input to that, the culture medium. So I go, oh my goodness. So the chemistry of the environment was selecting the genes. I go, yeah. And I go, okay, now that's great. What the hell does that mean for me as a human? Well, let's just take a jump. I'm growing cells in a plastic dish, but as a human, we are skin-covered petri dishes. Yes, underneath your skin, you've got 50 trillion cells and the original culture medium, blood. I go, so what? I say, it doesn't make a difference if the cell's in the plastic dish or in the skin dish. It's still controlled by the environment, culture medium, blood, the chemistry. And then all of a sudden it says, well, wait, so what controls my genes? I go, same as in the plastic dish, it's the chemistry of your blood. And I go, oh, and then I say, but what determines the chemistry of my blood? And I go, the brain is the chemist. I go, yeah, but that still didn't answer the question. What chemistry should I put into that blood? The brain is going to make it. I go, and this is the part that changed my entire life. And it turns out, it says, wait a minute, whatever thoughts you have in your head, that's a vision. And what happens is the brain translates that vision of the thought into complementary chemistry. If you have a vision of love, you release beautiful chemistry into the blood, dopamine for pleasure, oxytocin, bonding, a growth hormone. And I go, what's the relevance? I say, when you're in love, you feel great and your cells are getting nourished by growth hormone, which gives them great health. And that's why when people fall in love, they glow, they're healthy. Health, love produces health. But in contrast, if I have a picture of fear, I don't release love chemistry. Now I release protection chemistry. I'm afraid of something, so I put into my system stress hormones. I put in factors that affect the immune system. And I go, this is different chemistry. So I say, wait, there's a chemistry for growth, love, and there's a chemistry for protection, and that's fear. Love opens up and makes you grow. Fear shuts you down and puts you in protection. And you can't stay shut down for a long period of time because that interferes with all the functions of the body. So guess what? Positive thinking can heal you of any disease. Negative thinking can create any disease. It can even kill you. You believe you're going to die? That's a belief. And I say, so belief, the picture, is translated into chemistry, brain, and the chemistry via the blood goes to the cells and controls genetics and behavior. So your thoughts are the primary control of your genes. And I go, significance, just simple conclusion. The old story, what is called genetic determinism, genes determine the character of your life, that's what most people learn, is no longer valid. It is now recognized that the genes are receptive to the signal that you send them. And all of a sudden I say, well, then your thoughts are overriding your genes. I go, yes, they do. And then conclusion, which Mark has been talking about for years, is, well, then you better start thinking healthy thoughts, because it's the negative thoughts that put the chemistry in that will create any disease. And all of a sudden it goes, positive thinking, negative thinking, but it's all connected to belief. Well, it does, because up until, this time of understanding, it was a black box. Life happens. How? But once we understand this, when I started to show that the environment was controlling the cells, then of course the direction was, well, how does the environment control the direction of the cell? And it led me way off the trail of genes, because genes are just the blueprints. The question was, how does an environmental signal cross into the cell and then regulate the genetics? And this is the foundation, as you brought to our attention to, Mark, here, is it's a new understanding of genetics. It's called not genetic control, it's called epigenetic control. And people go, well, genetic control, epigenetic, it all sounds the same. But I say, no, it's a revolutionary difference, because epi means above. I mean, what do we call skin? We call skin epidermis. I said, why do we call it that? Because epi means above. And so I say, epidermis means above the dermis. And I go, yes, just underneath the skin is a layer called dermis. And the skin integument is above the dermis. So we call it epidermis. And I say, so what about epigenetic control? And I go, old story. This character is under genetic control, meaning genes control the character. New story, this character is under epigenetic control. And I go, what does that mean? I go, epi means above, epigene, above the gene control. And that's when all of a sudden we started to recognize that the environment is controlling the genes. Now, the profound difference for all the people out here is very important for this reason. While the gene story says I can't control them, they control me, the new story, epigenetics, says it's the environment and response to the environment that controls the genes. I go, wait a second, then that's my option. I'm the one that determines how I'm going to respond. I'm the one that's going to control my environment. All of a sudden I go, then we went from victim to master. If you understand this, then you recognize I have power over my genes through my thoughts. Placebo effect, nocebo effect, that's the term in medicine of how the thoughts are going to interact here. And so I said, well, when I started to show this to my colleagues, they looked at me because everybody at that time, 1967, was invested in genetics. Everyone around me in the lab, everyone was genetics. We're going to find a gene for this. We're going to find a gene for that. I'm the only guy out there going, it's not genetics, it's the environment. And of course they said, who are you? I said, Bruce. And they said, yeah, that's what we thought. And they let it go. And I had to work for a while because the missing piece was, how did that environmental signal get into that cell?
Yes, that's what I want to know. Tell us.
So I went back and I said, look, this works on bacteria, the most primitive of all organisms. The environment of the bacteria is controlling the genetics and behavior. So I go, well, wait, there's no nucleus. And there are genes. And I also did some research where I took the nucleus out of the cell. The nucleus is in your textbooks right now. It says the nucleus is the brain of the cell. I go, where the hell did they come up with that? And I go, because they thought genes were like neurons. They turn on, they turn off, they control our biology. So the nucleus is envisioned as the brain. The joke is the nucleus is the gonad, the reproduction structure. I always joke in the lecture, I used to joke, how did a bunch of male scientists come up with the idea that the gonad was the brain? And, it was a big joke and all that, but the reality was, the brain of the cell has to respond to the environment and then send a message to the genes. I go, well, how does it do that? I started looking not at the nucleus. I started looking at the skin of the cell, the membrane. And I go, why is that relevant? And I go, well, if you know human embryology, guess where our brain comes from? The membrane, the skin of the embryo. And I go, oh, then a cell and a human, both of them, the skin is the source. And I say, why is the skin the source? The answer is simple. The skin is the separation from the outside to the inside. So the skin can read outer environment, inner environment, and adjust the cell. So I start looking at the membrane. At that time, there's a principle of biology that is called that the structure implies the function. The more complex the structure, the more complex the function. So if you look at the membrane in the electron microscope, it's the most simple organization in a cell. It looks like an Oreo cookie, dark, light, dark, a little structure, and that's all it is. So for the longest time, my colleagues would say, oh yeah, the skin is like plastic wrap. It just holds the cytoplasm together. But what they couldn't see is in that electron microscope image, you couldn't see there are proteins that are built into the membrane. And I say there are two classes of protein. This is where it comes down to the whole world changes. One class of proteins has antennas, just like television antennas. They're called receptors, okay? And it's built into the skin of the cell. Receptor, I go, again, where are your receptors? Eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch, pain, temperature. All your receptors are built into the skin. So you and the cell have the receptors built in the skin, but in the cell, it's primitive and simple. It's a protein with an antenna. And when a signal comes in that is in complement to that antenna, it causes the protein to change shape. And that changing shape is the action of life. Proteins provide for anatomy. Yep. You can be alive or dead. You still have the anatomy, and it's still based on proteins. A cadaver is a dead person, but it's got all the proteins, they still look like a human. What's the difference between a live and a dead person? The answer is this. In a live person, the proteins respond to environmental signals, cold, hot, rain, what's going on in the world. The receptors pick it up, just like our eyes, ears, nose. We know what's going on in the world. We can see it, feel it, smell it, taste it. The cell does the same. The cell's actually a miniature human. And I go, so what about it? And I go, how does it see the world? And I say, there are proteins called receptors, just like this is a receptor, the eye. And I say, how does it see the world? And I say, when a signal matches the receptor, it causes the receptor to move. And that's where life comes from. It's a simple equation. Protein plus signal equals behavior. That's fundamental about life. I don't care if it's a whole human or a single protein. It's the environmental signal that gauges the protein that causes us to live and move. That's the movement of life, is proteins changing shape. So I say, yep, it takes a signal and a protein. What's the difference between a live person and a dead person? They both have proteins, but in the dead person, no signals. No signals are coming in, so the proteins never change shape. If they never change shape, then there's no movement, there's no life. Cadaver, okay? So I'm looking at the membrane and I recognize right away there are receptors that are responding to these signals. But there's a second protein type called a channel. A channel means like a pipe or connection from one side to the other. English Channel is a channel of water that goes between Britain and Europe. It's a narrow channel of water, the English Channel. A channel is a protein that is closed normally, and when a signal comes in, the protein opens up. So it's closed, and when a signal comes, the protein opens up, and a signal can go through the cell. So I say, what do we have? Protein 1, receptor, sees the signal in the environment. Protein 2, the channel, translates that signal into a signal that goes into the cell and controls behavior and genetics. So I'm studying this back then, 1985, when I finally saw it, and it's like my whole world changed, because I was writing a definition of the cell membrane. And I gave all the conventional physiological descriptions of the cell membrane. But on this night, I wrote a different definition. I recognize that the membrane is a crystal structure. If you see it, the molecules are all lined up like soldiers. And the membrane has a liquid core, a lipid core. Visualize a bread and butter sandwich. 2 pieces of bread and a layer of butter. I go, water can soak into the bread, but water can't go through the butter to soak into the other bread because it can't go across the membrane, that bread and butter sandwich. The butter stops it. So by definition, the membrane is called a non-conductor. Nothing can get across, because when it hits the lipid, nothing in water will go through the lipid, so it's separated from the outside. But then you put the proteins in there, and like the channel, that's one that opens and closes, can let stuff in. So I say, oh, well, then it can conduct some stuff. I go, some stuff, because the channels determine what comes in: sodium, potassium, calcium, glucose, histamine, whatever the signals are, the environment, the channel lets the signal come in. So now I'm looking at the membrane. I say, well, it's not a non-conductor because stuff can go through. Can everything go through? A full conductor? Nope. Only what can go through the channels: sodium, potassium, glucose, histamine. So it's not a non-conductor. It's not a full conductor. I write it's a semiconductor. Now I define the membrane, and I wrote this down, and here's the definition. 1985 about, I'm like 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm going, the membrane is a crystal semiconductor with receptors and channels. But there's another word for receptors called gate. So I write down, the membrane is a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And I wrote that down, and I go, I just read that definition. Where did I? My first computer, Macintosh. And right next to it is the book from Radio Shack about your microprocessor that runs the computer. And I said, oh my God, I opened up the book. In the introduction, first paragraph almost, a chip is a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. I go, ah, what a coincidence. The membrane has the same definition. But then as I started to follow the function of the receptor, the channel, the membrane, and put it all together, I said, oh my God, it's not like a chip. It is a chip. It translates the environment with signals that type on the receptors. Imagine the receptors on the surface of the cell. They're all these little antennas. I say, imagine that these receptors are downloading information. I go, they not imagine, that's what they do. They take the information from the environment, connect it to the channel, and that signal goes into the cell. And I go, wait a second, then the membrane is not like a chip. The membrane is a chip. I go, oh my God, the nucleus has programs. The nucleus is a hard drive. It's got all the programs how to do stuff. Yeah, but how do you activate the programs in your computer? You type on the keyboard and that pulls up the program. And I go, oh no, the membrane has these antennas, which are like a keyboard. If you look at the surface of the cell, there are all these different keys: sodium key, potassium key, glucose key, histamine, estrogen. I go, what? If the environment has that signal, it activates the key, just like typing on the computer, and that sends a signal into the cell, which controls the protein. Signal plus protein makes the movement, and it also controls the genetics. And all of a sudden I said, oh my God, a cell is a programmable chip. And that's why an embryo cell, before it's been programmed, it can form anything: skin, muscle, bone, brain. It can form anything. So embryo is a chip that hasn't been programmed. The cells are like in the skin-covered petri dish. They're living in a fluid, just like cells in a plastic dish. The fluid is all around. The fluid chemistry is going to determine which receptors are going to be activated, which then through the channel determines which behavior is going to be activated. So the chemistry of the environment determines which genes and which behaviors are going to be activated. That's what the culture study showed.
For sure,
Put
for sure.
this culture medium, you get muscle. Change the culture medium, you get bone. And all of a sudden it's like, well, then we go back to, then the brain is the one that determines the chemistry, and that chemistry then is based on your thought. Am I happy? Am I afraid? Am I angry? I go, oh, these thoughts make different chemistry, like putting it into the blood of the culture medium of your cells. So for every signal the cell can receive, there's a receptor that is tuned to that signal. Now, a very important part about your work, Mark, which comes in here, is this. I said the culture medium is the growth medium. It provides the nutrition and the nourishment to make the cells grow. When you eat food, you're creating culture medium. That's what the food is translated into. So all of a sudden, I could give you a simple insight. When I was growing cells in a tissue culture, I didn't buy my ingredients at Kmart. I went and bought the highest quality ingredients in the world, because if I gave them less than quality ingredients, the cells would immediately show a dysfunction. I could look at it in the microscope, put in a culture medium that isn't a really good culture medium, not a good quality, and the cells, you could watch them get sick right there. I'm going, well, what do you think happens in the skin-covered culture dish? You're making culture medium. So there's two parts to the culture medium. Mark, you emphasize one of the most important parts, and that is the nutrition element. If I'm not giving the good signals of food, then my cells are not responding in a proper way. If I give them a bad chemical food in the cells, you can watch them. They get sick right away. You can watch them die. So I go, so why is nutrition important? I say, because that's where the culture medium comes from. And that's why it is incumbent upon us to, if you want to be healthy, natural, organic, biodynamic food, growing healthy. Industrial farm food is toxic. I go, what do you mean it's toxic? I show in the class a picture of a farmer spraying the plants. What? The farmer's wearing a hazard suit. My God, he's spraying the food you're going to eat.
That's right.
Hello. And the issue is this, is that genetic engineering, trying to manipulate food, is a great failure. I made culture medium. I didn't compromise a thing. I had to get the best ingredients because the cells respond to what is in the culture medium, the blood. And if you're eating food and you're not putting in the best nutritional elements in that food, then you're compromising the fate of your cells. The function of the brain is to put the chemistry into the blood. And I said, yeah, but where does it get it from? I said, the picture in the mind. I go, the mind. Yeah, the mind has a misleading character. The mind sounds like, oh, there's one mind. I go, no, there are two minds. And this is where the whole world gets screwed up because we say the mind. Well, yeah, my mind, I should have consciousness and I want to be healthy. Then how come I'm not healthy? I got that in my mind. I go, because here's the problem. There are two minds. And if you don't get this, then nothing makes sense. And I'll give you the reason why. The brain is a computer. That's what I was finding out. The cells are miniature chips. The body's got 50 trillion chips. But when you put all the chips together, that's called a computer. So I say, so what's the point about this computer? I say, let's go back to the old days when you would buy a brand new computer. You spend a couple $1,000s, okay? And the point about it is simply this, is that you get a brand new computer. You just took it home. $2,000. I say, brand new. I say, push the start button. The screen lights up. That's called booting up. It's booted up. The screen's lighted. And I go, now do something. And you go, I can't do anything. I said, you just bought a brand new computer. What do you mean you can't do anything? Before you can use a computer, you have to put programs in a computer. I go, oh, but the brain is an organic computer, just like the silicon one you use. I say, we need to put programs in so we can use the computer. So I say, when do the programs come in? I go, the programs start coming in the last trimester of pregnancy. The fetus is reading the environment. I say, how can a fetus read the environment? It's inside the womb. It can't. I go, remember, the fetus is nourished by the mother's blood. I go, yep. That's why in the old days when I was in medical school, we say, what's the role of the mother? Eat well, take vitamins and supplements, exercise. And I go, oh, is that all the mother has to do? Well, in those days, it was the belief the genes are going to control it. The mother just had to nourish it. In the new day of epigenetics, where environmental signals are important, all of a sudden I say, blood has nutrition, and blood has environmental signals. The emotional chemicals, anger, love, jealousy, whatever ones you want, they're chemicals that generate those experiences. So if the mother is having an experience, then the blood from the mother is going to go into the fetus. By the last trimester, the brain is now booted up. But now, guess what? It'll read pattern. If the mother has periods of anger, then the chemistry of anger comes in periodically. That's a pattern. The fetus will learn that. If the mother's happy, then good, happy, loving chemistry comes to the fetus, and the fetus is happy. So all of a sudden I say, then the first programming occurs even before you're born. Because while you're in the womb, your brain is downloading programs because the mother is Head Start program. She sees the world in which the fetus is going to live. If the world is war-torn, there's war and violence, and she experiences that, then the chemistry that goes to the fetus is the stress chemistry, which will cause the body to build up like an athlete and become a fighter, like a street fighter. So all of a sudden it goes, very importantly, what it says is simply this. What's the mother's perception of the world? If she feels safe and happy, then the baby is getting information. I'm safe, happy, grow, be in love. If she's angry or she's afraid, then the fetus is afraid. Does the fetus know why? No. The fetus has the chemistry of fear. It's just the chemistry. It has no vision, but it knows that out in that world, the mother is giving information that it's not safe. And if it's not safe, then the genetics has to change to make a body that will fight to survive versus, okay, so that's when the programming starts. But it really kicks into gear. The programming is the equivalent of putting a program in a hard drive in your computer. It's built in. Now it's a program, okay? And then when the conscious mind, that's the creative mind, the subconscious mind, the hard drive, is the habit mind. It's got habits are programs. Programs are habits. And so I learn from experiences. I create programs in my hard drive. But when I'm conscious, the conscious mind is like the creator that types on the keyboard. I can type in all the wonderful messages. I want to be healthy. I love life. I'm going to get a great job. I'm going to find a great relationship. I say, oh, that's conscious. That's creative. That's cool. I go, what about the subconscious? I say, no, the subconscious programs didn't come from you. They came from your experiences in the environment during the development. When you're born, was your father a happy person or an angry person? Is your mother, why do I need a program? I'll tell you why I need a program. I have to fit into a family. I have to fit into a culture. And I go, yeah, but cultures change over time. And I go, that's why it's not genetic. You have to learn culture. I say, how do you learn? I say, how does an infant learn? They can't read a book. They can't go to school. And here's the secret. For the first 7 years of your life, your brain is not operating with creative consciousness, which is right behind your forehead. It's operating off of hindbrain hard drive. And I go, so why is that important? Because the hard drive is downloading experiences. I say, how? Watch your father. Watch your mother. Watch your siblings, watch your community in a state of that development. And the brain is in a vibration state. Let's back up. You can put wires on a person's head and read the brain function. It's energy, vibrations. A child's brain, if you put the EEG on the child's brain, up through age 7, it's not functioning at the higher vibration of consciousness. It's functioning just a little lower. It's called theta. Observing how a father behaves, observing how a mother behaves, how a community behaves. It observes and in state of hypnosis downloads the pattern. The conscious mind can type on the keyboard, just like on your computer. You can put the data in, you can create whatever you want, you can type on it. But the conscious mind, and here it goes, can think. I go, so what? I say, thinking is inside. I say, Mark, today's Tuesday. What are you doing on Thursday? It's not written in front of you, but I bet you in a minute you could go, oh, Thursday I am, and you have a picture in your mind. And I say, well, wait a minute. Then when you were using your conscious mind, you were, back up 1 second. Body is a vehicle, like a car. It moves around. It's got a steering wheel, okay? When the conscious mind, it's got its hands on the steering wheel looking out the window, it will drive you to wishes and desires. And then I go, yeah, but the conscious mind can think. What the hell does that mean? It's not looking out the window. The moment you start thinking, you're not looking out, you're looking in. I say, what if you're driving the car and you start thinking? I go, then you're not looking out the windshield. I go, don't worry. You know why? The subconscious is programs. It knows how to drive the car, and it's 1,000,000 times more powerful a computer than the conscious mind. So guess what? You don't even have to pay attention to the road. The subconscious mind will drive it, okay? So I go, wait, every time you are thinking, then the conscious creative mind is no longer looking out the window. It's looking inside. So every time you are thinking, then the conscious mind's not controlling the vehicle. I go, but I'm still here. And I go, the subconscious has got programs. And so the moment the conscious mind is thinking, the subconscious mind autopilot takes over. Now I'll tell you where the problem is. Where the programs come from in the subconscious mind, I go, from other people. Did they answer what you wanted? Did they, did their behavior match what you want in your life? Probably not. I go, therefore, then here's the point. And this is it. Of all the things we talk about right now, Mark, this is it. 95% of the day is the amount of time a person spends thinking. I go, well, wait a minute. Then 95% of the day, I'm not driving the vehicle. I go, nope. 95% of the day, the subconscious programs. But they came from other people. Good programs, bad programs. 60% of the programs we downloaded during that development are disempowering, self-sabotaging, and limiting beliefs. And I go, but you're operating 95% of the day from those programs, not from the creative program, because the creative mind is thinking, the biology is taken over by the program. Every day, every one of us is spending 95% of our time thinking and turning over the control to the subconscious. And I go, was that a good program or a bad program? Well, 60% are negative. So, and do you see it? No. So you become, it's invisible to you to see your participation. All you see is it's not working. I wanted to be happy and I'm not. Well, that person did this to me and this person screwed me here and you're blaming all these people. And the idea was, hey, you didn't see, you were the one that started the program because you're the one that was playing the negative programs and they're responding to it. And I go, that means most people have no understanding of personal responsibility. Most people are victims. I'm a victim of this, I'm a victim of that. And I go, no. So are you running your life? I say, yeah, but are you running it with the conscious creative mind, wishes and desires? Or are you running it with the subconscious mind, habits and programs? The answer is 95% of the day, you're running it from the programs. A very important point. Remember, the consciousness controls the genetics. Everyone's thinking cancer is caused by a gene. I go, that's a big BS. That means belief system, a big belief system story for this reason. And that is this: there is not one gene that causes cancer. There's not one gene. You have that gene, you get cancer. No, not one. Where did the cancer come from? I can tell you. Ready? They followed the fate of what happens when a baby is adopted into a family where there's cancer running in that family. The baby, adopted baby, will get the same family cancer with the same probability as any natural siblings, except the adopted baby has totally different genetics. So where did the cancer come from? Cancer is a program. And you can change cancer by changing the program. But if you believe the cancer is genetically controlled, which means you have no control, then you all of a sudden say, I'm a victim. And then you want to kill all the cancer cells because that's the technology. And I go, the cancer cells are not the problem. They're the symptom. That's the result of a problem. And so you can kill all the damn cancer cells you want, but you never got to the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem was something that caused a cell to become cancer. And all of a sudden we go back to the consciousness and the programming. Let's get away from the idea that I am a genetically programmed individual. No, I'm a creator and I'm creating this. And the emphasis is how? Through the blood, the chemistry, two parts, nutrition and information. And the idea about it is this: if you fail on the nutrition, it's like the machine will break down. That's what the function is. If you don't take care of the car, it breaks down. When you look in the junkyard and you see all the cars piled up, I say, is that because they were built wrong, genetically incorrect? I go, no. It was driver error that put those cars into the junkyard. It's driver error.
Our environment, our beliefs, our attitudes, our thoughts literally speak to every cell in our body. And it for me, it sometimes can be a bit daunting because if you are in a negative spiral, or if you have you have to be able to learn how to rework your thinking. I think it's an important thing to realize that your health depends on your mindset and your way of seeing the world and your beliefs and your attitudes. The greatest pharmacy is the one between your ears.
So it's a real pharmacy for this reason. If I take a drug and the drug affects me, that means there's a receptor that is tuned to that drug. And I go,
Right.
well, if you have a receptor on your cell tuned to that drug, do you think it was put on that cell waiting for the pharmaceutical company to create the drug? I say, no, if you got a receptor for the drug, that means you already make that drug. And then you have to say, why is it not working? I say, what's your mindset? We have been led to believe that I'm just a victim and these things are happening to me. And I go, no, that's your own program. You want to put in a new program. And I say, well,